Sure, and I would agree with John. There would be no plan to go change the seals. We had great performance yesterday, and there would be no reason to go relook at those. In terms of the filter, John said it. It's on the crow skid that's on the mobile launcher, and so what happened during the confidence test is that we saw a delta P across that filter that we didn't expect, and it was right around the time that we were transitioning to fast fill. So what we were left with was, did we have something that was clogged in the filter? Was the filter frozen? What caused that? And so we went in and we had to wait a couple of days for it to warm up, get it up to the right temperatures, because the last thing you want to do in a cryo system is introduce moisture. And so we went in, pulled that filter out. What we found was that it wasn't clogged. So we were left with, there's no debris in it, and so it was likely some air that got ingested into the system somewhere, and it froze as part of those operations. So we purged it out, put in a brand new filter, and continued our purges, and again had really good performance yesterday. We would have no plan to go in and touch that again. You know, one of the things with cryo systems is one of the ways you can actually have problems is when you open them up. Yeah.
Hey, you know,
They're working.
This technical community works closely together. I got to give kudos to the ULA folks and some other folks that stepped in and worked with the EGS guys and the SLS guys to share some of their learnings relative to frozen nitrogen or frozen air in their filters, and they had seen it. They had seen it before too, and that. They provided some valuable data to help drive this thing to closure.
I'll address the question about the Artemis II trajectory. Thank you for the comment. We'll see what we can do, getting you some information there, some more detailed information. I wouldn't say that the Artemis II trajectory is you know, in any way a better trajectory than Artemis I. It's different, and it's uniquely designed specifically for the Orion heat shield capabilities that we have for Artemis II. It's also uniquely designed based on this free return trajectory that we have. So it's not an entry profile that we would use on for the Artemis III mission, for example, that's in orbit around the moon and then coming back to Earth. It is something that we have the ability, because we're on this free return, we use this specific trajectory that allows us to come in and manage those heat loads on the Artemis II heat shield, which we believe we now, on all of the work that's been done since Artemis I, understand what we expect the performance of that heat shield to be specifically. We will make changes to the heat shield for Artemis III. In fact, it's already built. It's sitting over in the ONC building right now. So this is a unique trajectory, and it's specific for this mission. But I do take your point, and we'll see if we can get you some more detail on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's unique just to Artemis II. We won't use this type of trajectory again when we have the more capable heat shield.
Oh, sorry, Ken. Do you mind? We have a couple of other people online as well. Do you mind? We'll try to get back around to you, we promise. All right, Megan over there.
First of all, congratulations, Megan Moriarty with WESH 2 here. First and foremost, what, I guess specifically for Charlie, what kind of emotions were you feeling at 10:16 p.m. last night, and how confident are you for a March launch date? And then for logistic purposes, besides March 6th, what are some of the other dates that we could possibly see this launch?
All right, so how did I feel last night? I felt great. The team had worked really hard. We had some challenges in Artemis I, and you know, our SLS chief engineer and my friend John Blevins often says you have to earn your right to fly, and I felt like last night was a big step in us earning our right to fly. So felt really good. Very proud of the team, because you know, they continue to work through the challenges, whether it was in the integrity test, whether it was in the wet dress, and all of this really does prepare you to fly. You know, John talked about how the team executed, and all of that, you know, I would say that proficiency in execution, the timelines, the way that they've matured, the procedures, all of that was reflected last night, and it's all a testament to the work that the that the team did to be ready for that. So I felt really good about it, good about the test, proud of the team. How do I feel about March 6th? I mean, as Lori talked about it, we have to get through the flight readiness review. We got work ahead of us. But certainly, as I told our team during the pre-test briefing for wet dress, we have 2 big jobs ahead of us. One was a successful wet dress and meeting our test objectives for that. And, during Artemis I, we left a few of those on the table, and we still made a successful run at launch, even though there was a few of those we didn't demonstrate. Last night, we demonstrated them all. So that gives me great confidence in going into launch countdown relative to how to load the vehicle, the performance of the SEALs, the performance of the team, kind of things you might see in term count. Let's see. And then the other work that's ahead of us is the contingency pad access that I talked about. That is a first-time op at the pad. So we haven't done that before. It's a new capability we developed for Artemis II, specific to providing a retest of the flight termination system at the pad. If you recall, for Artemis I, we roll back to retest that. That's where we have access in the VAB. So we have these 2 access trusses that we install on the mobile launcher. It provides temporary access out to those compartments so that we can access the ordnance and we can go retest it. So I will have you a much better answer on how that goes once we get into the work. But that is really the last remaining thing, other than just buttoning everything up, getting into your final configuration for launch. So I feel pretty good about that. Yeah, we have. I believe our launch window goes through the 11th.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11, and that's online.
Exactly. Can I just add one more just quick note to follow, Charlie? We've talked a lot about what we've learned through the wet dress rehearsal and where our levels of confidence in getting to the launch. But I did just also want to stress this is a flight test. The whole mission is still a flight test. This is our second time to fly the SLS and Orion systems, the first time with crew, the first time with the environmental control systems active, the first time with the flight termination systems active so that we can support crew. So I just want to keep people, in your mind, we're talking about how confident we are in getting to launch and our excitement about this mission, but don't want anybody to ever lose sight of the fact that this is a flight test and the entire mission. We will continue to learn. That's the whole point of this mission, is to learn.
Okay, we'll take one more in the room here before going on the phones. Thank you.
Hi, T.J. Mascaro with the Epoch Times. Thank you so much, and again, congratulations. Can you elaborate a little more on what work the closeout crew still has to do, and talk about all the changes that were made from Wet Dress 1 to Wet Dress 2? Thank you.
So for the closeout crew, we did deploy them to the pad yesterday. We wanted to demonstrate the closeout of the Orion crew module and all of our procedures. We didn't have, I wouldn't say we had any significant changes in the plans, other than, you may recall, there were some, I'll say some minor things that we wanted to go take a look at in terms of, and some of them are very small, right? We had, and one simple one, right? The elevators on the 274-foot level. We have blast doors up there. Those doors were closed out for when the closeout crew arrived at the pad. Normally those are left open so that when the elevator doors open, you can walk right out on 274. So that during Wet Dress 1 kind of held us up for a few minutes while they deconfigured the doors. That's a simple thing, but those are that set of simple things that on launch day can cost you sometimes minutes that matter. And so we wanted to go back through and do our closeout one more time. The closeout crew performed amazing. They deployed to the pad. They were right on their timelines. We didn't have any significant issues as part of the closeout activities. We do plan to do one more demo before flight, just because, John talked about our launch rate and talked about the opportunities to go through and do training. And in the case of the closeout crew, there isn't a full trainer anywhere that gives you the crew module hatch and the last hatch. and the white room. And so where we get that is in the white room with the flight hardware. So we do intend to do one more closeout demo just to refine our timelines and look at it one more time, but I don't envision any significant changes as a result. Team did great yesterday.
Great, thank you for that question. We'll go on the phones now. Marcia Smith, Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much for taking my questions. Actually, I think I have two of them for Lori. The first one is about a comment you made a little bit earlier about for Artemis II, and you wouldn't be picking the crew because you had to pick the right crew for the right mission. And could you just elaborate on that a little bit? And does that reflect questions about which human landing system you're going to be using? And is there any update on that? And nearer term for Artemis II, I'm wondering what NASA's strategy is for getting the word out to the public about Artemis II, because I'm still surprised at how many people don't even know that we're going back to the moon.
I'll take your first question first. Yes. So as you know, we have been over the last several months thinking about trying to introduce a little bit more of a competitive nature and trying to get our crew to the lunar surface. And so we are looking at potential, the potential of having either the Starship or the Blue Origin landing capability. So that will make a difference in training. And then also just even as we refine the work that we want to do on the lunar surface, that will also define exactly what types of capabilities that we need, the complement of capabilities that we're going to need with that crew. So that's kind of where we are and what's going to drive the selection. So I would anticipate, over the next many months or year or so, us starting to really refine and think through what that will look like. So stay tuned on that. Let's see. The first question had to do. I'm sorry. What was the first one on, or the second question on Artemis II?
How would you get people to know?
Oh, get the people to know about it more. Yes. Yes, I agree. We need to start getting the word out. Let's do that. I'm going to rely on you guys to help us a lot in getting the news out and getting the story out, and our PAO folks as well. And hopefully, by leaning in a little harder on when we think we really anticipate our ability to launch, hopefully in March. I think that helps a lot as well, where it's not an ambiguous time in the future. We've had this successful wet dress rehearsal yesterday. I think a lot of folks up to this point have said, we watched Artemis I and it went, significantly beyond when we first started talking about it. But this is really getting real, and it's time to get serious and start getting excited.
All right, next question on the phone, Jeff Faust, Space News.
Good morning. Quick question on the leak rates that you measured. Was that low leak rate, that 1.5% or so, constant throughout the test from fueling through the terminal countdown, or were there points in the test that leak rate peaked, and does that provide any sort of diagnostics about what might have been the root cause of the issues you were having earlier? Thanks.
Yeah, so no, it was not a constant leak rate. In fact, I just have the max leak rate for during our field operations, and it was, I'm going to say this, 0.4% was our max in fast fill, 0.4%. So that is almost unheard of, even in Artemis I. We did not see leak rates that low. The leak rate in term count we saw was in the first run through term count, we had 1.6% was the highest we saw. And in our second one, it was 0.7. And it was not constant the whole time, because what happens in term count is that we're going through something called pre-press. And so you have these pressurization pulses that are being sent to pressurize the flight tank. And so you could see that you'll see some fluctuation in that leak rate. But the numbers that I gave is the max that we saw during that time. So, again, very good performance yesterday.
Jackie Waddle, CNN.
Hi, folks. Thanks for doing this. A couple questions first for Charlie about the seals. What's the difference between the seals that you just put on versus the one that were replaced? If I understand correctly, these warp with the chill down. So what makes you confident that these seals, won't continue to warp with chilled on launch day? And then question for whoever can take it. I know that there was an indication that you could work towards an earlier launch date than March 6th. I think March 3rd was kicked around. Can you discuss why you were able to evaluate launch dates that weren't previously identified and why you ultimately decided to stick with March 6th? And are you going to continue to consider maybe alternative launch days down the line, or is it pretty much set to these that you've previously identified now? Thanks so much.
Yes, I'll take the first part of that on the seals. There's no difference. The seals are exactly the same. They're just newer seals. All I can say about that is these seals are installed when we build the core stage up in the VAB, as Charlie mentioned earlier. And as you know, we're in the VAB for a pretty good while because we got a lot of work to do there. And then we go through rollout, and we understand that we do have certain loads on the rocket as we roll to the pad. And so I'm not going to speculate anymore. What I said earlier is we're going to let the teams go off and look at the data that we got over the day yesterday and see how that addresses things that we might need to do different moving down the road, or maybe we just look at operationally if we do something different.
And I'll take the question about the additional potential launch opportunity dates. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking about other potential windows or launch periods beyond April, there's an enormous amount of analyses that has to go into determination of which of those dates actually have appropriate launch windows that we can use that are, we want something that's in general at least 2 hours in duration so that we can have a good chance of getting off on that date. And then all of the constraints I mentioned, thermal control, eclipses for power, communications. And so what we had done with March 3rd, which we had been looking at, is that the preliminary analysis was kind of on the edge, and so it was originally taken off of the plate, and we already knew that the 4th and the 5th were not viable at all for some of those reasons. And so there wasn't a whole lot of the additional work wasn't really done on the 3rd, but we started really sharpening our pencils of trying to maximize the number of days. Could we eke out another day in March that could be viable? And so in particular, the Orion team went off and started looking at it and looking at not just the nominal case and the baseline case, but they have to look at all of the off nominal cases, all of the potential scenarios that we might end up in. And how the Orion spacecraft would still be able to perform, keep our crew safe, and be able to return back to Earth in a safe configuration. And so that took an enormous amount of work, but they went and they did that. They did all of that additional analyses. They ultimately did determine that the 3rd could have been a viable date, but with the work that we had ahead of us, it just didn't seem feasible, particularly following Wet Dress 1 and considering the work that needed to be done with replacing the seals and replacing the filter. And so we opted to eliminate that as an available date. But I anticipate as we go through the systematic approach that we have for assessing each of the viable or the available launch dates, we'll go through those. We already have, I believe, a rough cut at those for May and June and beyond, but we'll continue to refine those. And as I said earlier, as we sharpen our pencils and we start to get a better understanding of exactly which of those dates are available, we'll make those available to you guys as well.
We're staying on the phones. We have quite a bit there. Stephen Clark, Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. John Honeycutt just answered my main question, but I'll follow up on the seals. What are the seals made of? What material? And remind me, was there any difference between or design change made in the seals themselves between Artemis 1 and 2? That's for John, I guess. And for Charlie, we heard some things. You mentioned the comms issue during the countdown and also the booster avionics issue that came up during the terminal count, I guess, yesterday. Can you kind of just go over, what the path forward is on resolving those? Thanks.
So it's a metallic ring that fits between the two interfaces, and the metallic rings has the sealing material built up on it. It's Teflon, and then it's kind of a complex geometry to the spring because it's got a spring assist feature to it all around the seal, and then even I believe it's the 4-inch seal is actually a pressure assisted seal. So, but no, there's been no change since Artemis I in the design.
Okay, Joey Roulette, Reuters.
I had a quick question on the communications issues that was mentioned earlier on this call. I know it's not an exciting thing that happened, but I'm just curious to know what was causing that, what the fix was, what the situation is there. Thank you.
So I can take that. We did experience a communications issue yesterday. We were able to track it down to a network configuration issue, and so we've been able to take corrective actions to ensure that we don't have that happen again. One thing I'll also say is that we were able to go through, while it wasn't planned to demonstrate yesterday, we did go through a contingency procedure that we run in the event that we have a loss of comm, and we implemented that yesterday. It worked great. The only slight holdup that we had was when the comm issue, when we encountered it, it was just as we were getting ready to take hydrogen from slow fill to fast fill, and I did ask the team to hold up. I didn't want to go to fast fill until we had stable comm, just because in the event that we were to have something happen, I wanted to make sure that we could communicate across our team. But we do have a contingency plan that involves test nets on our radios that we utilize, and so we did go through and deploy those yesterday in the firing room, and we were able to keep communication with our team while the comm network team was able to go troubleshoot and isolate the problem and get us back stable.
Nicole from the Canadian Broadcast Company is on the phone. Go ahead, Nicole.
Actually, that was my question. I was going to ask about the comms issue. But, I mean, you seem pretty confident that this won't creep up again. I'm asking because this also occurred during the first attempt with Artemis I. Had you changed anything since then with comms?
An issue like this during Artemis I, I do not recall any issues that we had like this with the communication system during Artemis I. We had a different comm system during Artemis I than the one that we have in place today, and I don't recall any communication issues during Artemis I.
Okay, let's see if there are new hands in the room because we still have quite a bit on the phone. We'll go here. And then we'll go back to the phones.
Hi, Bert Dicht with the National Space Society. A question for John. At the pre-rollover press conference, you mentioned the enormous responsibility of the MMT and that we're not going to be going till we're ready. We've made a lot of progress since then. I'm just wondering, as we're moving toward launch, what will you be looking at specifically? Is there anything that maybe concerns you or is keeping you up at night?
Now, are you talking relative to the MMT or the hardware?
To the MMT.
Yeah, so, you know, we did talk, we looked at it, and I think the leadership above me agreed at some point in time in this path to today, we needed to do more to get ready. I feel like at this point we have demonstrated a significant amount of improvement to where I am almost happy. And I may not ever be happy, I don't know. But I'll tell you, we have another sim, in-space sim planned at JSC for the MMT on Monday. And then, you know, knock on wood, we want to go fly as soon as we can in the launch window. But if something opens up there, and God forbid that to happen, I'll be looking at other things we can go do to stay sharp.
All right, we have time for two more on the phone. Tariq Malik, space.com.
Yes, thank you very much. Charlie, you mentioned that during this fueling test, the Artemis II crew, they weren't participating, but that they were observing. And I'm just curious kind of what their reactions or their input was that you got after the fact about what they're thinking now that we're past this milestone, and that you've got March 6th on the horizon.
So, we were really lucky to have our flight crew in the firing room, 3 of the 4 members observing the test, and I would say that they were excited to be there with the team, and pretty pleased with all of the results. So, I wouldn't want to put words in their mouth, but I think they were as happy or maybe happier than I was, and I was certainly thrilled with the results.
Hey, Reed said in the MMT bubble with us, and in particular, he sat right next to the Moon to Mars chief engineer, and he stayed right there through the whole time. And Reed made the same observation that I made earlier today. He's been either directly tracking or indirectly tracking what this team's doing to improve, and he saw that and he noted it to me after we finished the test. So he reflected on the launch team and the MMT.
All right, Andrea Leinfelder, Houston Chronicle, you have the last question of this press briefing. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask another question about the communications. I recall there were communication blackouts during the first wet dress rehearsal for the Artemis II mission. And there was an alert or a news update that said it had been an ongoing issue. So is there a larger issue with the communications? And, did going to the contingency plan yesterday provide confidence that, that plan would work on launch day if there was another communications issue? Thank you.
So we did have a comm issue during wet dress 1, and there's been like many communication issues, just a reflection of technology, if you will. They can happen for a lot of different reasons. And so the team has been working very diligently to determine as we go through each of them, and not all of them are the same. Sometimes it is related to, some of the comm issues can be related to, some configuration between centers. And so you may have heard that. We had some of that in one of our wet dress where we had some of our loops that weren't connected in the way that we expected, which is why we do wet dress, so we can figure out all these things. So on launch day, that we get all this configuration and all of this mapping correctly. And so that was one form of the comm issues that we've had. We've also had another issue on a prior test where we dropped out of what was called duplex to simplex mode within the server, which is that the comm essentially worked just fine, but the redundancy wasn't there. And so you may have heard us speak about that. Yesterday's issue was something completely different. It wasn't within the voice comm system itself, but it was in the network. So hopefully, as we have worked our way through this, pinpointing each and every one of these root causes and correcting them, hopefully on launch day we don't see this. We'll certainly be putting operational controls in place as well for once we get our config in place and freezing it once we test it out. So there'll be some operational controls that come along with that. And was there another part to the question? Oh, our backup plan. So, because we had some issues before, we wanted, with wet dress 1, we wanted to make sure that we had, one of the things that I think NASA does really well is we learn from the data that we're given, and then you try to take that and you apply it and you think about, well, what could the next failure be and how would we address that? And so we had a comm issue. We thought about, we went and corrected the issue that we had, and then we thought about, well, what if this happened? And what if it happened in the most dynamic state? And what would we do? And how would we address that? And that's where the contingency plan came up. We had that proceduralized, so it wasn't something we were doing yesterday. We had radios available in the firing room. We had people designated that would be available to provide those as they were needed. We knew what channels we would use. It was all in our procedures. And so while I hope to not execute that on launch day, I certainly know that if we need to, that it is available to us. And I do have, I know you said that was our last question, but I want to go back because I didn't answer, I think, between the multiple questions, it got missed. But someone asked about the issue that stopped us in terminal count, because we always plan to count down and hold at a minute 30. We did not plan to have an issue. We did have an issue, which was booster power 001, which looks at three sets of, it basically looks at three measurements. Two of them are from the ground and one is from the booster onboard battery, and it's just making sure that we have the right voltage to support the mission. And so what happened is that the flight measurement looked great, it was solid, and we saw a delta to the between what the ground side was seeing. So we're going to go take a look at that. It was no constraint to yesterday. We're not going to fly, and so we knew that we were in a good position to press on. We did that, but we will be going and looking into that and figuring out why we saw that delta between the ground and the flight. Certainly between the two, you want your flight measurement to be sound, because that's the one you're going to go fly with. The ground one's going to be left behind, but we'll go work that out and figure that one out. But that was the issue someone asked about that stopped us in term count yesterday.
Thank you so much for that follow-up. Charlie, as you can see, we try to get to as many of you and as many of your questions as possible, but we do have to wrap up today's news conference now. Again, thank you so much for your questions, and thank you, of course, to Lori, Charlie, and John here. And as you heard them say, we are going to target our first March opportunity, March 6th, pending any open work. But ahead of that attempt, we'll, of course, host more of these briefings so that you can stay up to date on our progress. But until then, everyone can learn more about this mission by going to nasa.gov/Artemis. We're pulling that up on the screen right now. Again, nasa.gov/Artemis. Again, thank you everyone for your interest, for your questions, and have a great rest of your day.